정책 전환의 그 기준선이라고도 하죠. 대통령께서 생각하시는 레드라인은 어떤 것인지 알고 싶습니다.
탄도미사일을 완성하고 거기에 핵탄두를 탑재해서 무기화하게 되는 것을 레드라인이라고 생각합니다.
For the very first time, South Korean President Moon Jae-in has defined what he considered a red line in dealing with North Korea's missile and nuclear weapons programs. What he did not specify, however, is the consequences that await Pyongyang if it did cross that line. Now, President Moon's remarks came just days before South Korea and the U.S. began their joint annual military exercises, which North Korea strongly protests and sees as ruse for preemptive war. A critical weekend and around the Korean Peninsula this week. Let's get it rolling. And in the studio with me this week is, of course, to my left, Dr. Kim Yeon-wook, professor at Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And as always, Dr. Kim Chang-soo. Dr. Kim, good to see you again this week.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Now, South Korean President Moon, marking 100 days in office, he's drawn the red line against North Korea's missile and nuclear weapons programs. That's raised controversy here in the nation as well as abroad in the U.S. as well on whether it's appropriate for the president to publicly specify such a strategic idea on live television, of course. What were your observation points from the 100-day press conference by President Moon?
I think it was very appropriate for him to mention the red line, which is very important in security terms for South Korea and the United States altogether. I think he specified what red line is, which means that if the North Korea develops ICBMs and also small nuclear warheads, which can be equipped on top of the missiles, I think that's what President Moon considered as a red line. Maybe some controversies of what he mentioned exist. First, is there going to be any specific measures if North Korea crosses over the red line? I mean, what kinds of further measures do we need to take? I mean, maybe we have to think about the military options. What other options do we have? That's the first controversy, I think. The second one is, whose red line is this? I mean, from the surface, it seems like ICBM test and successful development of ICBM seems like targeting the mainland the United States and seems like very irrelevant from the security of South Korea. So that second one, is it red line something related to South Korea too, or only pertains to the security of the United States? That's second question, I think. And third one is that is red line, definition of red line, is this something that South Korea and the United States have coordinated before? Is this something that the U.S. also agrees with? That's the issue we have to think about. I think definitely the major purpose of President Moon's mention is North Korea's ICBMs and nuclear weapons is very serious, and we have to get ready for it. But I think even we think about that mention more specifically, I mean, we have a clear rationale for him to talk about that.
I think before the President makes this kind of remarks to the red line for North Korea, I think he has already done a lot of consultation with staff and also quite possibly, hopefully, with the United States, because in itself is a tremendous deterrence rather than we are doing this and that. This is a tremendous deterrence vis-a-vis North Korea. That's why he made this specific reference this time. I know there's a lot of controversy and also criticism, even in South Korea and the United States. I look at some major newspapers criticizing that this reference is only for the United States, excluding South Korea. But I don't think so, because South Korea has an alliance with the United States, and under the MDT, Mutual Defense Treaty, we are also obliged to come to the aid of the United States if the United States were to be attacked by North Korea, or it's any territory. So it is quite natural for the South Korean president to make that kind of speech. We are ready to cooperate with the United States if there is another war, major war on the Korean Peninsula. And if North Korea dares to attack any part of the United States with its ICBM, nuclear-tipped ICBMs, that's the end of our tolerance. So this is quite natural for any president, particularly under the NDT obligation. We make this kind of speech by the president is actually a tremendous boost. Don't worry too much about this kind of what are the impact or consequences of this remark. As a matter of fact, the United States really wants to see this kind of remarks coming out of the mouth of the Korean president. So I'm positive because there are so many people who wondered because there's kind of lack of confidence in each other and given the past history of this government. So it's understandable that some people have come up with a kind of criticism and even suspicions and worry. But I think this is basically for deterrence purposes. And if North Korea does not, cross over this red line, we will do this and that. And that comes to his second part, which is South Korea will play a leading role when it comes to the defense of the Korean Republic.
Just to give you some background or reference, the president did not know what questions he'll be receiving from the media. And I just shot that question. I did not exactly anticipate a crystal clear answer like that. Another thing is whether President Moon's remarks on the red line, and then afterwards he was asked by a CNN reporter on whether, what South Korea will do, or if South Korea can do anything if Donald Trump decides to take military action against North Korea, which he said there will be no war on the Korean Peninsula, and President Trump will have to get the permission of South Korea if he were to go in to North Korea with some kind of a military option. That raised some controversy as well in the U.S., and the State Department refused to answer that. What's your view on that?
In the summit, the two leaders have agreed upon two things about the leading role of South Korea and the Korean Peninsula. First one is that in order for the peaceful solutions and peaceful atmosphere in the Korean Peninsula, South Korea has to take a leading role. The second one, after the APCON transferred back to South Korea, in dealing with the joint military deterrent attitudes and postures, South Korea has to take their leading role. So I think in security terms and in a peaceful dialogue terms, South Korea has to take the leading role. That's what I think two leaders have agreed in the summit meeting. The second one is that I think he re-emphasized what he had a speech in Berlin, so-called Berlin speech, which means that he has suggested many proposals about the North and South Korea relations, making a more peaceful Korean Peninsula. But I think at the same time, in the first hand of this speech, he also emphasized what South Korea has to do. There are some, concerns about the South Korea-U.S. relations recently. Because we are allies, a very strong alliance. We need to have very close coordinations and collaborations with the United States. But that doesn't mean that we have to all the time listen to what the U.S. says. I mean, sometimes there will be some objections and discussions. And throughout the discussions and candid talks, maybe the alliance would develop in the future. So I think in that sense, President Moon clearly delivered the message that South Korea wants a peace in the Korean Peninsula. There should be no military actions in the Korean Peninsula. I think that kinds of clear messages delivered to the United States, and that's very frank discussions and frank delivered speech, and that doesn't mean that there would be any frictions in the alliance.
I want to make kind of points about President Moon's red line remarks and also his leading role remarks. At first, they might seem kind of controversial, and there are a lot of criticism and controversy here in Korea, in Washington, D.C., which is understandable. But on second thought, you have to see the context under what background he was referring to those specific remarks. Because it was the end of, throughout the end of July and early August, North Korea threatened us, and Mr. Trump tweeted a lot about the what he really feels about North Korea if there's another war, or even they really try to strike any parts of the United States. So if you look at that kind of context where these references were made out of, then you can understand. So quite often we said, don't dare to say draw any, red line or red lines, because it will definitely easy to be crossed out. So we have a kind of habit not to mention specifically about the red lines, but I think he is smart enough. You're talking about his staffers didn't mention anything about the red line before the president made it. I'm quite sure, because for those specific time period, maybe a couple of days, when you see the increasing threats from North Korea and increasingly very harsh words from the United States. So as the president of the South Korean Republic Korea, that he was on that specific time of National Liberation Day speech and also the press conference, he felt inclined to make this kind of speech, even without consulting, maybe as if you're right, his close allies or his staff members. So I think this was in his mind for long. So when it comes to the proper time, he said, yeah, as a president of the South Korea and as a supreme commander of the armed forces of South Korea, we have to make this clear, not to our own public, but to the United States, also to the North Korean leadership, that we are not tolerate if you are coming close to this red line. This is the red line that we cannot endure. So it is all your responsibility if you are there to cross this red line. So that's why that really prompted Mr. Moon to make the specific result, even though it has some controversies and worries. But on second thought, I think you understand why he did make very unusual red line remarks.
Some experts in the States wants to use the term red zone instead of red
red
line.
zone, yes. Perhaps a wise move, right? Because
Or just blur the line.
Yeah, so that we have a lot more options to choose from. So speaking of the UFG Freedom Guarding drills, which kicked off earlier this week, and now all throughout this week that joint drills will be on. In fact, for 10 days it will be starting Monday this week. These are what North Korea has long been strongly objected to. So they view this as a war rehearsal, an attempt or a rehearsal to invade Pyongyang. That's their claim. Of course, South Korea and the U.S. have repeatedly said every year that it's defensive in nature. In fact, President Moon Jae-in said it's provocations by North Korea that actually make these South Korea-U.S. joint drills necessary, and that forms a very vicious cycle. What about these drills rile North Korea so much? The key resolve, Full Eagle, and the UFG. Last time they launched SLBM, and every time there have been drills, they've done something to provoke South Korea and the U.S. Why are they riled so much?
I think North Korea argues that the main reason why they develop nuclear weapons and missiles is because of the U.S. anti-North Korea policies. Maybe that would be true. Some part of it might be true. Some part maybe not be true, because North Korea, by the U.S. involvement in the Korean War, has been pretty much occupied by the U.S. and South Korean and UN soldiers and military. Almost, got rid of its territory, but because of the Chinese intervention, it barely, saved its territory until, to the south of 38th parallel. So I think from the North Korean perspective, the United States is a very big threat to the North Korean regime and territory, I think. North Korea sometimes use, argument, which is that, it's developing its weapons because of the United States. U.S. is anti-North Korea. Use these kinds of, argument to provoke militarily, to develop nuclear weapons, so on and so forth. So I think at this time, I'm not sure. Maybe North Korea would do something, but I don't think it would do right away, face to the UFG Freedom Guardian exercise, because historically, North Korea, when North Korea tested nuclear weapons and missiles, it did not do when the political cost is very high. When the exercise is right there, military exercise is there, U.S. military assets on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea really did not do many things. I mean, maybe after the exercise is done, they will try to do something. And also, you have mentioned that President Moon, mentioning the vicious cycle, emphasized that South Korea will be very firm to North Korea if North Korea does any provocations militarily. So I think now the mood is very anti-North Korea, very squeezing North Korea. So I don't think North Korea would do any, military provocations or any tests until the Ultimate Freedom Guardian exercise is done, I think.
Yeah, North Korea might perceive this kind of, threatening to us, all this kind of military exercise and training. But look at why we began to have this kind of military exercise between the United States. Primarily, it is North Korea who invaded South Korea during the Cold War. And after that, they, like a lot of things they have done, a lot of provocations. That's right after that, so we came up with the idea that we have to defend this country with this kind of combined military exercise and training. But all countries have their own schedules of military exercise. This is just one thing. But the problem for North Korea is they see this as an excuse for further provocations. And this carries tremendous significance in South Korean news media, so high profile. That's why they criticize this. But this is actually, this year we are doing at this reduced level. And this is basically civilian defense drill. It's not just field exercise out there. We're using a lot of mobilizing all kind of troops. It's more like a computer exercise, test of TTX. So this is partially a response to North Korean threats of WMDs.
I think what we've basically confirmed through North Korea's moves this time around, right after President Trump's fire and fury remarks and the Guam line that it cannot cross. North Korea state media said, although they do have the capacity to strike Guam, its leader, Kim Jong-un, has said, you know what, let's take a wait and see approach. So I think we've confirmed that North Korea, in fact, does not want to go head on in a conflict vis-a-vis the U.S. and does not want a full-blown war in this region. How North Korea responds to this UFG, I suppose, will be an indicator of what the security situation will develop to be in this part of the area. How do you expect North Korea to respond to this, in perhaps not now, but in the days and weeks following the UFG?
Yeah, you mentioned, I don't think until the UFC is finished, North Korea's possibility of North Korea's provocation is very low. But as you have mentioned, once the exercise is done, North Korea still has to do some more testings, nuclear and missile tests. First, to finish the tests and to reach the level of nuclear state and ICBM holding states. And secondly, to be accepted by international community in the United States as a de facto nuclear state. That's the ultimate goal of North Korea. North Korea wants to reach the level as quickly as possible, because now the international community sanctions is getting hardened and squeezing North Korea. So these kind of sanctions, of course, North Korea will try to survive, but survive those sanctions. But sanctions are really, making North Korea hurt. So I think, when sanctions hurt North Korea, kind of make North Korea get hurt more and more, I think North Korea would reach the level of de facto nuclear state and try to have a deal with the United States.
Yeah, that's quite sure. North Korea really wants to be a de facto nuclear power, for sure. But there are also some very skeptical scientists and engineers in the United States for very specific and technical reasons. It might seem North Korea might reach that kind of state maybe in a year, at the end of this year, within 2 years, or even 5 years. But some of the very skeptical experts believe it's a very difficult technology, and North Korea has to go through. Flying this long missile is one thing, but giving a kind of missile tip to nuclear missile ICBM that can hit any parts of the United States is not that easy for given the North Korean technology level. It might take even longer time than they presumably thought. So I think they are looking for, probably, if they are reasonable enough to look at what was the cause of this kind of continued problem, And we have been showing this much capability, but the United States really doesn't want to believe us because we have not shown our real capability. We just threaten to use this and that, but we have not shown with the real ICBMs tipped with the nuclear weapons on it. That's a tremendous, difficult task for the North Korean leadership. I think they are beginning to understand that. Even before that, they didn't know that, how serious to make the kind of technical advancements in a short period of time. So in that sense, if you look at all his recent remarks over 2 specific occasions, I think to me, it makes a perfect sense. Despite some worries that it might cause some potential catastrophe for South Korea, Japan. Theoretically possible, but if you look at the practical side of it, I think with this specific remarks by the President Moon on this specific doesn't cause tremendous kind of confusion to the North Korean leader, to the Washingtonians. I think they understand, and South Korea should understand why the President, as a President of the Republic, made this kind of specific remarks at this time of the year.
So wrapping up, my final question to you, gentlemen. August has been, by many news media outlets here in Korea, in South Korea, August has been, identified as a month of possible conflict, possible tension building. What is your forecast of the rest of the month for South Korea, U.S., and this Northeast Asian region?
Well, I think, if possible, I think North Korea would try to develop and finish developing its nuclear weapons and ICBMs by the end of this year. I mean, maybe that will be too early, but maybe by the end of this year or sometime early next year, I think North Korea will try to reach the level and then come to a dialogue with the United States. Or before North Korea reaches the level, I think they would come up to a dialogue with the United States. I think now they're having a back-channel dialogue, I think, in New York between the United States and North Korea. And I think one of the reasons why the U.S. Ultra-Focused Guardian exercises, the U.S. military troop has been curtailed. One of the reasons for this would be that there will be some, dialogues, back-channel dialogues between the U.S. and North Korea. There might be some coordinations about what will be the conditions for dialogue. And in order to, make the conditions for dialogue to be valid in the future and to make the back-channel dialogue to be more, effective in the future, I think the U.S. does not want to prod North Korea, maybe decreasing its military troops in the exercises. So I think if these kinds of back channels become successful, I think sometime this year there might be some, dialogue between the United States and North Korea, which is good for South Korea too. We can use this as a, chances for a North-South Korea dialogue.
Many North Korea watchers in Korea and Seoul and Washington, they believe there might be another provocation by North Korea. Right after, before, during this exercise and after, because that has been the case for North Korea for many recent years. But we might face some other different type of provocation this time, rather than another ICBMs, because as I told you, ICBMs is not that easy one to reach. Maybe IRBM and some other, but they've done a lot of smaller missiles against South Korea. They already did. And so there is no reason to prove that again this time. So they're going to do some other very typical conventional weapon that is kind of a violation, provocation along the DMZ or NLL, and also cybersecurity attack. That's a possibility. So that's why we are doing all kind of exercise training, considering all these possible attacks from North Korea, not just ICBMs or the nuclear weapons explosion. So all kind of potential provocation from North Korea. That's what we are concerned about. That's what we are really trying to defend our republic against. I think so there is a room for North Korea, but I think if North Korea sees all this kind of the developments over the years and what's their vulnerability, because they believe this kind of strength comes from the missiles and nuclear weapons, I think that's not true. So they have to really look at the reality, or I might call it different side of our relations with the South Korea and the United States, that by abandoning and freezing this kind of nuclear or missile developments temporarily might lead to a kind of negotiation with the United States and South Korea. So I think there's a lot of room for negotiation for North Korea, not South Korea. It's all depends on how they're going to choose, depending on which path they're going to choose. I think this is really important for North Korea, because I think they have already impressed its own people already by developing all these missiles and nuclear. So maybe, because we made it very clear, this is the red line, we are not going to endure any more attacks in terms of missiles and nuclear weapons. So I think they have to take this message very seriously. And from that on, we can start a negotiation with North Korea, or dialogue, or military talks, as we have proposed before.
So again, we found the ball in North Korean court again, and the next few weeks will be critical for North Korea to make the right move, or whatever move that it deems right, and that will, I suppose, affect the entire security situation in Northeast Asia and I suppose around the world as well. Well, thank you two gentlemen for very fruitful discussions today. Thank you, Dr. Kim, for coming.
Thank you.
And Dr. Kim, as always, thank you.
Thank you again.
And I'd like to thank you all for staying with us all throughout. We'll be back next week again on Peninsula 24 with issues related in and around the Korean Peninsula. Thanks.